I was replaced by the intern I trained because my director said, she's younger, cheaper, and obedient. So I quietly nuked every automation I built. When chaos hit and they begged me back for double pay, I just laughed and said, too late. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot behind our office building in downtown Columbus, staring at the text my director Mark had just sent me. We need you to come in, ASAP, it's urgent. 2 weeks earlier, this same man told me straight to my face that I was being replaced by the intern I had trained. Her name was Kelsey. She was 22, fresh out of Ohio State, and barely knew how to work a pivot table without Googling it. But she was bubbly, eager, and adored telling Mark how visionary he was every time he suggested something painfully basic. I remembered that meeting so clearly it still made my jaw clench. I'd walked into the conference room expecting my annual review. Instead, Mark leaned back in his fake leather chair, folded his hands over his stomach, and said, "Listen, this is just business. She's younger, cheaper, and will do whatever I tell her. You're polished, but expensive." He smiled like he was doing me a favor. When he told me they'd let me go at the end of the week, something inside me went cold. But I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't even ask why after 3 years of fixing the messes that kept this department from collapsing. I just nodded. And then I went back to my desk and did exactly what no one expected. I started quietly pulling out the invisible threads that held their entire operation together. For 3 years, I had built every automation, every workflow, every script that kept this dumpster fire of a department functioning. I'd created processes that ran overnight so our morning reports were ready. I'd set up cleanup jobs that prevented database crashes. I'd created templates that turned chaos into something that looked almost competent. Nobody had asked me to. I did it because I couldn't stand the mess. When they decided I wasn't worth the money, I decided the mess could have them back. So yes, I deleted my automations, every single one. I removed my scheduled tasks. I rolled the system back to how it looked the day I started, disorganized, glitchy, manual, and painfully slow. Nothing destructive, nothing illegal, just original. When I clocked out on my last day, I handed in my badge and walked out feeling lighter than I had in years. 2 weeks later, the messages started, first from coworkers, then supervisors, then Mark himself. Reports weren't running. Deadlines were getting missed. The system kept crashing. The intern was overwhelmed and crying in the bathroom daily. Upper management was furious. Clients were threatening penalties. Apparently, they had no idea how much of the department's stability had come from the expensive one. This morning, they called and begged me to come in. By the time I pulled into the lot, Mark had texted again. "We can offer double your salary if you'll return and fix everything. Please, we're desperate." Double. After telling me I wasn't worth my current rate. After replacing me with someone still learning how to format cells. But here's the part that really stung. They didn't want me back because they valued me. They wanted me back because they were drowning without me. I sat there staring at the glass doors, thinking about everything they'd put me through. The disrespect, the dismissal, the smugness, the way Mark had smirked when he said cheaper. So when I finally typed my reply, I didn't hold back. And what I told him, well, it changed everything. The truth is, my anger toward Mark didn't start the day he replaced me with Kelsey. It had been building for months, maybe years, but I kept pushing it down because the job paid well enough, and I told myself stability mattered more than respect. I'd joined the company right after moving to Columbus from Dayton. I didn't know anyone in the city and was desperate for a steady paycheck. When I interviewed, Mark acted impressed by my technical skills. He said things like, "We need someone exactly like you, and you'll be my right hand." I believed him. I shouldn't have. From day one, the department was a disaster. There were half-finished spreadsheets, duplicate databases, random scripts people had created years ago and forgotten. Nothing matched. Nothing flowed. Everyone worked in their own silo, and most of them had systems that only they understood, barely. During my first week, the monthly reporting process crashed completely, and clients were threatening fees. I stayed late 3 nights in a row fixing it. I didn't even get a thank you. Mark just acted like the emergency had been inevitable, and I happened to be the person on shift. But that was how it always went with him. If something broke, he'd find someone to blame. If something worked smoothly, he'd claim he directed it. I should have quit earlier. I know that now. Still, there were moments that kept me hanging on. My coworkers were decent people. There was a strange camaraderie in surviving the chaos together. We joked about the ancient server that groaned every time we ran a query. We bonded over terrible coffee and late-night pizza on crash recovery nights. I didn't want to abandon them. And honestly, I took pride in my work. I liked making things run efficiently. I liked solving problems no one else could. When I started building the automations, it wasn't out of spite or ego. I just wanted to stop drowning in repetitive tasks so I could focus on bigger problems. The automations made everyone's lives easier, including my own. Within a year, we were hitting deadlines effortlessly. Reports were early instead of late. The database errors dropped to almost zero. I didn't need to babysit every process anymore. People finally had breathing room. Mark took credit, of course. Upper management praised him for streamlining operations. They promoted him. They gave him bonuses. Meanwhile, I was doing the work that actually made the difference, but I swallowed it. Because swallowing it was easier than starting over. Then last fall, Kelsey arrived. She was nice at first. Nervous, eager, friendly. She asked me how everything worked, and I taught her patiently. I told her about the breakdowns we used to have and how the automations kept us above water. She said she didn't know anything about scripting but wanted to learn. I respected that. I wish she had stayed that person. Over time, though, I noticed little things. Kelsey started hanging around Mark's office more. She laughed too hard at his jokes. She started using words like strategy, optimization, and efficiency when she barely understood how the system even talked to itself. And slowly, Mark began praising her. Publicly, loudly. Meanwhile, whenever I pointed out a missing variable or a broken input, he'd brush me off. He'd tell me to be more collaborative, which was his way of saying, let the intern look good. It all built up until the day he sat me down and told me she was cheaper and replaceable. I wasn't shocked when he said it. I was shocked that I let myself work for someone like that for so long. But the worst was still coming. And I had no idea yet just how deep the betrayal went. After Mark told me I was too expensive, I spent the rest of that week watching everything around me shift in ways that made my stomach turn. It wasn't the firing itself that hurt the most. It was the way everyone started acting once they knew I was on my way out. At first, a few coworkers looked at me the way people look at someone who's about to go into surgery, sympathetic, worried, unsure what words would help. But then there were others who suddenly became avoidant, like getting too close to me might make them the next to go. Corporate fear is contagious. Kelsey, though, she changed the fastest. The day after the meeting, she came to my desk with this overly bright smile and said, I hope there's no weirdness between us. You know this is just the way things go, right? I remember staring at her, wondering if she really believed that. Wondering if she had any clue what she'd actually signed up for. Because the truth was, Kelsey had absolutely no idea how much the automations carried her workload. She didn't know the difference between a manual override and a scheduled job. She didn't know how the database handled corrupt entries. She didn't even know the system had a memory leak that I had patched every Monday before anyone else came in. She wasn't trained for the real operation. She was trained for the version of the system I had created to save us all from drowning. But I didn't say any of that. I just forced a polite smile and said, no weirdness. Because at that point, I had no intention of saving her or Mark from the reality that was coming. Throughout that final week, Mark kept handing me extra tasks. I think on some level he expected me to wrap up everything I had ever built before leaving. He probably assumed I would tidy the place like a maid in a hotel checking out. At least once a day, he'd show up at my desk and ask, can you document everything before you go? Or, make sure Kelsey knows the entire system. Every time I nodded. Every time I did nothing of the sort. I kept doing my regular job until my last day, but I didn't lift a finger to make their lives easier after I left. If anything, I quietly noted every single place where they were helpless without me. I wanted to know exactly which parts would break first. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the office kept shifting. Upper management stopped by more frequently, checking on the department. They asked about my automations. They asked about my reporting tools. They asked how much knowledge transfer was happening. Mark lied every single time. He told them everything was fine, that Kelsey was quick to learn, that the transition would be smooth. He puffed himself up with confidence he hadn't earned. Kelsey, for her part, acted like she had already stepped into my role. She started calling meetings. She started reorganizing workflows she didn't understand. She even tried correcting me once, the person who trained her, about the file path for one of the data pulls. Everything was shifting with this gross sense of momentum, like watching a slow-motion car crash where everyone thinks they're invincible. Then, on my final day, something happened that snapped the last thread of goodwill I had left. Something small enough to seem like nothing to them, but big enough to tell me exactly how they saw me. And that's when my anger turned into something colder, sharper, focused. On my last day, I came in early. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed the office empty so I could finish the quiet work I'd started the night before. The rollback, the resets, the little unbraiding of all the threads I had woven into something functional. Not sabotage, just subtraction. By the time people started arriving around 8:30, everything was already done. The system wouldn't fall apart immediately. It would be slow, annoying at first, then frightening, then catastrophic. I spent the morning packing the few personal things I had left. A mug my sister gave me, a couple notebooks, the plant that I kept near the window in the back corner. Nobody said much. A few "we're gonna miss yous" from coworkers who meant well but couldn't look me in the eye for long. Around noon, Mark sent me a message. Conference room. 12:15. Bring your laptop. I knew it wasn't a thank you meeting. I also knew he didn't need my laptop for anything legitimate. It had already prepped my offboarding steps 2 days earlier. But I went. I wanted to see how he planned to end things. When I walked in, he was sitting with Kelsey. She had that same bright, brittle smile she always faked when she thought upper management might walk in at any second. A notepad sat in front of her like she was ready to take minutes for a meeting that didn't matter. Mark didn't even look up before saying, "We just need one final thing from you. A full walkthrough of all your automations. Everything, start to finish." I froze, a walkthrough, on my last day, with no notice. He continued, still not looking at me. "We know you built a lot of stuff. We just need you to dump it all for us so nothing gets lost. I assume you've documented it, but a live explanation is clearer." Then he finally lifted his eyes, cold, dismissive, already halfway checked out. And that's when he dropped the twist I never saw coming. He slid a printed email across the table. I recognized the header immediately, HR. It was dated 2 days earlier. It said, "Internal approval, rehire budget declined. Employee is not eligible for rehire." Not eligible for rehire. Even if something went wrong, even if the department collapsed, even if they needed me desperately. They had intentionally marked me as someone they would never bring back. I looked at Mark, and the smug look on his face told me everything I needed to know. He wanted me gone permanently. He wanted the credit. He wanted the spotlight. And he genuinely believed Kelsey would replace everything I'd ever done with a smile and a YouTube tutorial. "We just need this walkthrough," he said. "Then you're free to go." That was the moment my stomach dropped, not because of the insult, but because of the calculation behind it. He had no intention of keeping the department alive. He had no intention of acknowledging the work I'd done. He had already erased me from the future of the company, but still wanted to squeeze every last bit of knowledge out of me before the door hit me on the way out. That was the moment something inside me hardened in a way I'd never felt before. I closed the laptop. I stood up, and I walked out of the room without saying a single word. They called after me. Kelsey even sounded confused. But I didn't turn back, because if they wanted chaos, then chaos was exactly what they were going to get. When I walked out of that conference room, something inside me went eerily quiet. Not angry, not emotional, just steady, focused. Like my brain finally understood exactly what kind of man Mark was, and exactly what kind of revenge would actually hurt him. I didn't storm out of the building. I didn't slam anything. I just went back to my desk, packed my plant, zipped my bag, and left through the side stairwell like it was any ordinary Friday. But the second the heavy door closed behind me, the cold air hit my face and my mind snapped into a different gear entirely. They had already marked me as not eligible for rehire. That line in the HR email stuck with me on a loop. For years, I kept that department from crumbling through sheer willpower and a ridiculous amount of technical glue work. I solved problems no one else could even diagnose. I saved them from fees, lost contracts, and system failures so often that it became expected. And Mark decided I was disposable. He decided Kelsey was enough. He decided my work was just free. He wanted everything I created without the human being who built it. Fine. He could have exactly what he asked for, a department without me, completely. I spent the weekend in my apartment in the German village, sitting at my kitchen table with my old personal laptop, replaying every detail of the system in my head. Not to do anything malicious, but to think through the exact points where reality was about to hit them like a truck. I didn't delete anything destructive. I didn't break anything illegally. I didn't plant anything hidden. I simply took back everything I had created on my own time, under my own initiative, with no compensation, no protection, and no recognition. If they wanted the original mess, they could have the original mess. But as I drank my coffee Saturday morning, another thought emerged, deeper, colder, more strategic. They wouldn't realize what I'd removed until the deadlines hit. Reports would generate empty. Dependencies would fail silently. The database would start choking on dirty entries. Automations they didn't know existed would simply stop running. And I knew exactly how long it would take before the panic began. 5 business days. The following Monday, I got the first text from an old coworker. "Hey, did you change anything before you left? Nothing's running." I didn't answer. By Wednesday, "We're missing 2 client reports. Kelsey is freaking out." By Friday, "Upper management is on warpath. Mark is blaming legacy errors. Not sure how long he can lie." I kept my phone face down and went for a long walk along the Scioto River, breathing in the cold January air. I felt no guilt. None. Because this wasn't sabotage. This was exposure. I had simply stopped propping up a system that everyone pretended worked because of Mark's leadership. The next week, everything collapsed. On Tuesday morning, I woke up to a missed call from an unknown number at 7:12 a.m., then another, and then a text from Mark himself. "We need you. Call me ASAP." I stared at that message for a long time, sitting on the edge of my bed. They were desperate, but desperation wasn't enough. Not for what came next. Because later that afternoon, I opened my inbox and found something that made my skin crawl, the second twist I never saw coming. Something that flipped this from corporate incompetence to something much darker. The email came from someone I never expected. Lauren, an analyst from our Chicago office who I'd only spoken to a handful of times. We'd collaborated on a couple cross-department reports, but we weren't close. She wasn't the type to get involved in drama. She was quiet, overly formal, the kind of person who double-checked a comma before sending anything. Which is why her subject line hit me like a punch. "You need to see this. It's about Mark." I opened it slowly, half expecting it to be some confused message sent to the wrong former employee. But inside was a screenshot, a forwarded internal thread between Mark and one of the regional VPs. And the second I started reading, my stomach dropped. In the thread, dated a week before I'd been fired, Mark wrote, "I'm moving forward with the transition to the intern. She's impressionable and easier to manage. The current lead has too much autonomy. They built systems I can't fully control." Too much autonomy. Systems he couldn't control. My chest felt tight as I kept reading. "Once she's gone, I'll need someone from your team to shadow us temporarily. I know her automations are running most of the department's operations, but I don't have direct access to all of them. Some of them appear to require her credentials even when transferred." That was a lie. Every automation I built used generic system accounts. He had access, he just never bothered to learn how anything worked. But then came the part that made my hands go cold. "If the intern struggles, we can call it growing pains. It'll buy us time. I already filed the not eligible for rehire tag so she can't return and claim ownership of anything." Ownership. Ownership of my work. Ownership of the work I built on weekends. At night, on unpaid hours, because I wanted the department to survive. I felt a chill go through me as I read the next line. "Once everything is transitioned, I want it to wipe all her old access and code history. I don't want anyone questioning where the processes originated." That was the moment the twist fully landed. This wasn't about me being expensive. It wasn't about Kelsey being cheaper. It wasn't even about incompetence or favoritism. Mark wanted to erase me, completely, professionally, Technically, historically. He wanted to take credit for the entire system. He wanted the workflows, the reports, the fixes, all of it attributed to him and his mentorship of the intern. He wanted to build a career on top of my work while burying my name so deep I couldn't even be hired back if they begged. My hands shook as I scrolled further. Lauren had added a single line beneath the screenshots. "I don't know what happened on your end, but this is wrong. And he's lying to our VP about the system failures. He told them your code was unstable and still causing issues even after removal. I thought you should know," blaming me, even after firing me, even while begging me to come back and fix the mess. I closed the laptop and just sat there, staring at the wall in my apartment as everything clicked into place. The system collapses weren't the twist. The replacement wasn't the twist. The twist was this. Mark never intended for me to have a career after leaving. Not just the company, anywhere. He wanted to sabotage my professional reputation while claiming my work as his own. This wasn't incompetence. This was a targeted, calculated erasure. And suddenly, everything, the panic calls, the desperate messages, the offer to double my salary, took on a new, darker meaning. He wasn't terrified because the department was failing. He was terrified because the collapse exposed his lies. I exhaled slowly. Now I knew exactly what kind of revenge he deserved, and it wasn't silence. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake on my couch staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation I'd ever had with Mark. Every offhand comment, every dismissive shrug, every time he'd made me feel like I was being dramatic for pointing out a real risk in the system. And for the first time, I saw the pattern clearly. The next morning, I called Lauren. She picked up on the first ring. Her voice was low, tense. "There's more, I didn't want to write it in an email." I sat up straighter. "Okay, tell me." She hesitated before saying, "You need to understand something about Mark. He isn't just incompetent, he's been building his career on other people's work for years." "What does that mean?" I asked, even though I already had a sixth sense I knew. "It means," she said slowly, "this wasn't random. It wasn't a misunderstanding. He's done this before, taking credit for systems he didn't build, claiming he streamlined departments that were already functioning, removing the people who actually did the work so there's no one left to contradict him." A cold shiver ran up my spine. She kept going. "Our VP only sent me the thread because I asked why Chicago was being looped into Columbus's operations. That's when I saw the way Mark was framing the narrative." "What narrative?" She took a breath. "He told the VP that your automations were unreliable, that they never fully worked, and that he had been the one slowly improving them. He said he was training the intern to rebuild them from scratch so the department wouldn't be dependent on a single technician." My stomach dropped. "He said you were resistant to collaboration," she added. "That you'd built everything in a way that made it impossible for anyone else to maintain. He implied it was intentional." That was when I understood the real reason I'd been marked, not eligible for rehire. It wasn't punishment. It was protection for him. He needed me gone because as long as I was there, his lies didn't hold. He needed me erased so nobody would ever question the story he was telling. He needed the department to fall apart just enough after I left that he could blame the collapse on my unstable code. And then rebuild it publicly, loudly, with Kelsey at his side as his bright, obedient proof of leadership. And the worst part? He never once imagined the department would actually crash this hard. He thought my systems were simpler than they were. He thought the pieces could keep running on autopilot long enough for him to rewrite the narrative. He thought Kelsey could fake her way through the gaps. He thought he could control the fallout. But the chilling truth was this. Mark didn't care if the department failed, as long as he could spin the failure into a story that made him look like a savior. That was the horrifying part. He wasn't terrified of losing clients. He wasn't terrified of missed deadlines. He wasn't terrified of the technical disaster. He was terrified because the collapse happened too fast, too visibly, too completely. And now upper management was asking questions he couldn't answer without exposing himself. Lauren spoke again, her voice softer. "We've known for a while that he uses people like ladders. But what he did to you, that was deliberate. Deliberate erasure, deliberate replacement, deliberate career sabotage. He wanted the department to depend on him and him alone." I sat there, gripping my phone, feeling my pulse in my teeth. For the first time since quitting, I didn't feel confused. Or angry. Or hurt. I felt clarity. If Mark's entire plan depended on pretending I didn't exist, then the most devastating revenge would be reminding everyone exactly who I was. And exactly what I built. I woke up the next morning with a kind of calm I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not panic, just a steady, grounded certainty about what I needed to do. Mark wanted a world where I never existed, where my work, my systems, my contributions were rewritten under his name. So my revenge had to do the opposite. It had to make my existence undeniable. I spent the morning gathering every piece of documentation I still had. Old project files, early drafts of automations, time-stamped commit logs, email chains, backups of the workflows Mark said never existed, screenshots of the systems I built from the ground up, nothing proprietary, nothing illegal, but all of it mine, created on my time, with my skill, and specifically excluded from my job description because Mark always called it extra. By noon, I had assembled a clean, factual packet. No opinions, no emotion. Just evidence. Then I wrote the email. I addressed it to the Chicago VP, the Regional Director HR IT Security Legal, and for good measure, the CIO, the one person who cared deeply about system integrity. I did not include Mark. The email was simple, written in the same calm voice I used when explaining a database function. This is a documentation packet outlining the automated workflows, reporting tools, and error prevention systems I personally created between 2021-2024. These were not part of my job description and were built independently to stabilize the department. Since my termination, these systems have been removed or improperly accessed. I'm sharing this packet for accuracy, since they are currently being referenced in internal communications under another person's name. I attached the evidence as a single PDF. Then, at the very bottom, the line that would end Mark's career. Additionally, I'd like clarification regarding an internal rehire, note marking me as not eligible for rehire. I received no performance warnings or documentation to justify this status. I hit send. Then I sat back and waited. It took 16 minutes. 16. First came an email from HR asking for a Zoom meeting. Then a second email from the VP requesting a call immediately. Then a third email from it, and this one made me laugh, saying they were investigating unauthorized access requests and system tampering that appeared to have originated from Mark's admin credentials. Within the hour, I got a message from a former coworker. "What did you do? People are running around like there's a fire." 3 hours later, Mark's office door is closed. HR and legal are in there with him. 5 hours later. Holy shit, he's being escorted out. But the best was still coming. The next morning, I got a call from the Chicago VP. Her voice was clipped but respectful. "We owe you an apology," she said. "A large one." Apparently, after reading the email and comparing the timestamps, they realized Mark had been presenting my work as his own for over a year. He doctored documentation, misattributed code changes, and regularly dismissed my contributions as legacy fixes. All while grooming the intern to parrot technical terms she didn't understand. He wasn't just incompetent, he was fraudulent. They fired him on the spot. The rehire ban was removed immediately. HR issued a formal apology. And then came the part that actually mattered. They offered me a new position, higher than my old one, reporting directly to the VP instead of Mark's chain. Double salary? No, better, accountability, visibility, protection. And revenge that didn't require me to lift a single illegal finger. But I still said no, not angrily, not bitterly, just honestly. "I'm not coming back to clean up someone else's lies," I said. "But thank you for finally seeing the truth." And it felt good. God, it felt clean. Mark tried to erase me. Instead, I erased him. By the end of that week, the company posted a job listing for his role. Meanwhile, I accepted an offer with a different firm in Columbus, one that valued my skills from day one and didn't blink at my salary requirements. I walked into my new job feeling lighter, steadier, unburdened. And when Mark texted me from a new number weeks later, begging me to talk, because things had gotten blown out of proportion, I sent back the same line I'd typed in my car the day he panicked and asked me to return. "You should have thought about that before you tried to erase me." And then I blocked him. Every automation restored itself, just not for him.